Okay, so you've downloaded the file, you've opened it up, and hopefully you've remembered to save it out straight away and give it a new title. So I'll just call it BoxModelling Start 01. Okay, I'll just replace that pre-existing one. Okay, so let's go over to our Scene Explorer and let's hide anything that isn't the geometry that we want to work with. So let's turn off the lights, the camera, and we've still got the ground on there, and the ground currently, I will freeze that ground, and it's frozen because I've got that little button deselected. Okay. Box 1 is the standard prim, so let's rename that. Standard prim. And box 2 is our, let's just call it Ed Poly 01. Okay. Ooh, bit messy in there. Just okay, Ed Poly 01. Okay, so I'm going to hide the text, and I didn't mean to do that. Hide the other piece of text. Where is it? Standard prim, standard prim. There it is. Okay, and I'll just refresh on where we're up to with our understanding of the difference between the two objects that are in front of us. Okay, so Alt-W to maximize the scene. I'm going to hit P on my keyboard to go to the perspective viewport. If you ever want to go back and use the camera viewport, you just hit C, and you'll see top left-hand corner of my screen up here. As I hit P, it goes to perspective. I hit C, it goes back to the camera view. At the minute, they look the same. That's because I haven't changed the perspective view, but if I now hit C, it'll take me back to that camera view position. So it's very useful as a default position to drop back to. So I'm going to operate in perspective for the moment. Okay, so our standard primitive currently has, it's 40 by 40 by 40 centimeters. It's got a segmentation of 1 by 1 by 1, and this is the thing that I duplicated to create this object. And once I duplicated it, I converted it to an editable poly. Once I convert it to an editable poly, of course, I lose my standard parameters. I lose the standard parameters that are available with this primitive. But instead, I have my 5 sub-object levels. Okay, so they are vertex, edge, border, polygon, and element. I'll go through each one of these, and we'll deconstruct this object and rebuild it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is going to go to the polygon sub-object level, and you'll remember that is number 4 on the keyboard. So 4 takes me there. I'm going to cut a hole in the roof. That's gone. I'm now going to just demonstrate a couple little issues, and well, actually a couple little ways of dealing with issues that you will face at various points. So first things first, if I want to refill that missing polygon, the easiest way to do it is use the cap function, which is available once you select border, sub-object level, and then click on the edge where the hole is. And you'll notice it goes all the way around. Doesn't work for all objects, but if you've got a 4-sided poly or a 3-sided poly or even a 5-sided poly, it will work. 5-sided, sometimes it doesn't anyway. 3 and 4, it will work. So you just select that and look for, underneath edit borders, look for cap. And it refills it. Very handy. Okay, so that's a fast way of rebuilding a missing polygon. Can we do it a different way? Let's have a little look. Cut it out again. And this time round, I'm going to stay in the sub-object polygon level, but I'm going to, so stay in there, and I'm going to use the create function, which is underneath the edit geometry rollout, so create. And I'm just going to basically do a kind of dot to dot around these vertex and draw a new polygon. But before I do that, I'm going to put my snaps on, This particular snap is the one I want to activate, and I'm going to right click on that snap, and I'm going to make sure that the vertex is selected. I don't need anything else. I just want it to snap to vertex. So that's all I want to activate, and then say, close that down. And now when I click on there, I can go click, 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 and click. And it refills that poly. So with the create function, you can draw a polygon out if you've cut a hole in an object. And it's really, you know, you've got to get used to doing that, cutting a hole and rebuilding a polygon. It's not that difficult. Okay, I'll turn my snaps off again. Don't need them for the moment. Okay, so I'm going to, once again, delete that polygon. And I'm going to go to the vertex level, and I'm going to basically take like this. Oh, it says, say, I'm going to select this vertex. And obviously I can move this vertex at this point, up, down, left, right, etc. Control Z to undo that move. But actually what I want to do is I want to break it. So let's break it. Once it's broken, it looks exactly like nothing's happened and exactly the same. But in fact, if I now select it, you'll see that I've actually separated those two vertex away from each other. And that is basically what's going on. You've got two vertex being welded together, and we can reconnect those just by control clicking both of them. So control, click, click, and hold the control key down, click the other one, and you can reconnect them. And you think, well, why didn't that work? That surely if I hit connect, that's going to work. But actually it doesn't work just like that. We're going to go into the weld function instead, and if I change the parameters here in the weld function, there'll be a point at which these little fellas will snap back together again. You see it? They're kind of snapping beyond each other. So it's kind of, it's not quite doing, again, it's not quite doing it the way I want it to do, but it's showing some interesting kind of functionality, but it's not right. It's not quite the way I want it to operate at this point. So that's not the right way. Let's do it another way. Let's do it let's use a different function. So firstly, deselect them both, and then select one, and then choose, rather than weld, which will work for smaller jumps between vertices, but in this instance the gap is too large. Let's do something else. Let's use the target weld, and we'll drag between one vertex and the next, and basically it welds them together. So let's see, did that happen? Did it work? Yep, they're back together again. So we were able to separate them, and then we were able to reconnect them with the target weld function, like so. Okay, nice. Now I want to reposition that vertex, and I'm going to do that. It's pretty decent. Not perfect, but it'll do. Okay, so we can cut a hole in a poly and refill it in with the cap function or the polygon create function. We can separate or break vertex, and we can re-weld them together using the target weld function. And last week we looked at using the connect function with the edges. So let's have a little look at that. So we said select one edge, and then control click and select another edge, right click and choose connect. And we've got options here which allow us to put a couple connections in. And we can, of course, move those new edges that we've created, and we can slide them around however we see fit. And we just say OK to do that. Now, if I select the two edges that I've just created and do the same thing again, I'm going to go to connect. It does them at right angles. It creates edges at right angles. So it's another way of subdividing and creating more edges within a polygon. So now we've got individual poly that we can operate with. Okay, so I'm just going to undo that. Yep, there we go, back to where we were. I want to also show you that at the polygon level, we can use a function called tessellate. And the tessellate, once you click it, will subdivide it evenly. Or, I'll undo that, Control Z. Or we can also use the little tessellate function button beside it, and I can say tessellate it. But this time, it's displacing the tessellation as well. So we have other options. We can select from tessellate the edge from edge, or we can tessellate from face. Again, another way to subdivide. Now, remember last week we were conscious of the fact that if we created a connect between two edges, we were also inadvertently creating vertex, not inadvertently, but we were also creating vertex that perhaps we weren't aware of, and those individual vertex have their own function and position on this object. Now the problem here is that although it kind of, if I render this, it doesn't look like there's any issue at all, but really what you want is to create good flow in your polygon, so good topological flow. And by that we mean if there's an edge, it should flow all the way around that object, and later on you'll really have to get used to this. So particularly if a shape is organic, we want to create that flow. So we want to be able to go all the way around in the creation of our edges. And I'll just step back a few. I'm going to recap that poly as well while I'm at it. Just going to put a cap on there. And this time round, I think what I'll do is I'll just hide the standard prim for the moment. This time round, I'm going to look at it in the front view. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to just change that from wireframe to default shading and make sure I hit my F4 button so that I can see all my edges that are currently green. I'm going to marquee drag from the side, go back to my perspective view, and now I've got all those edges connected, or well, selected, sorry. When I right click and do connection this time, and say yes to that, you can see that now the edge flows all the way around the object. I can do the same this way around. Right click connect, and basically it's flowing all the way around. Now that is the way to keep what we call the flow going, basically the flow between one poly and the next. So we're really always aiming to operate with a four-sided polygon wherever possible. It's going to, later on you'll see, it's going to improve your model as it gets more complex and you're getting into kind of more complex renders. The modeling process will be aided by that, just a little bit of awareness to keeping that flow going. Okay, so what if I do a little simple extrude on this now? Okay, what if I do a simple, using the edit poly, I'll do a simple inset. And now I'll do an extrude, but I'm going to go back in a little bit. Okay, nice. Okay, so simple functions, connecting edges, cutting a hole, being able to rebuild it, use the extrude function, use the outline function, maybe even use the bevel function. So the bevel function is like a bit like an extrude function, but it'll also do that. It's like a second click action, and it'll also resize that polygon. So it extrudes it, but then it resizes the polygon too. Okay, so I'll extrude that again, like so. All right. I should hit Z just to focus. You know what? I'm just going to come out of that extrude function, deselected it there for a moment. I'm going to come out of my sub-object level by just deselecting that. And I'm just going to reposition my object. I'm going to go down to the coordinate typing down here at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to hit 0, 0, and 0. And I'm just right-clicking on those little spinners there to make it 0, 0. It just makes it easier when I hit Z. I'm kind of, everything's right in the middle of the world space. Quick render, F9. Ooh. that's not right. Something's gone a bit wonky there. Let's have a little, let's cancel that. Let's see what has happened. There seems to be some insanely bright setting. Something's gone weird. 1 second. Yeah, I've just realised what I've done. So if I hit F9 and do a quick render, and this will happen to you as well, if I hit F9 and do a quick render, it's going to be absolutely blasted because I'm not currently using the camera, the physical camera for my render. So the physical camera is currently controlling the amount of light that's being rendered in the scene, but I'm not actually rendering through that viewport, so I need to do that. So I'm going to go back to C. That's my physical camera, and you can see top right hand corner, I'm back in the physical camera viewport. So that was, I pressed C to get there. And now I want to do my render. Everything starts to look a whole lot better. And I've got a little funky material on there called a wireframe, and it shows you the kind of material, so it shows you the wireframe construction of the object that you're rendering. It's a nice thing to operate with. Now, you're going to experiment with this, but there's just one other little thing I want to do before I let you kind of loose on it and just start playing with those few tools. Okay, just cancel that for a sec. I want to do one last thing, and that is take that object and I'll say okay, that's basically just made a quick clone of it, and I'm just going to spin it around. So get my rotation. I'm going to spin it 180 degrees. And you notice I put my snaps on before I did that, and that helps me move around with 5-degree intervals, which is perfect. I say I'm going to go to my top view and just going to reposition those two objects. Get my move tool and just put it there and there. Just zoom in a little bit. Try and get that nicely lined up. Not bad. There's a bit of rotation there that isn't quite right. You see that? I'm just going to, just because I'm being a bit weird, but I'm just going to square all that off a little bit. There must be some kind of rotation. Something's a little bit off somewhere. There. Ooh, 180 looks perfect. Okay, I'll not try not to worry about it, but normally that irritates me a bit. So, okay, looks fairly well aligned. Although I'm still not happy with it. Not perfect. Just that little tiny rotation. How irritating. That looks better to me. And if I do the same up here, just give me 2 seconds. Okay, so the kind of lined up okay. Back into perspective. Hit Z. Select one of those objects in there. Just hit Z. There we go. Back to perspective. Just arc and rotate around. Come out of wireframe view. Go back to default shading. Oh no, don't want to play default shading. Will do fine. Hit F4. Now I can see my two objects. Okay. So currently we've got one. It's called Edit Poly 02, and the other one's called Edit Poly 01. And what I'm going to do is take Edit Poly 02, and I'm going to attach. Look for the attach function. Where is it? I was in the hierarchy tab accidentally. Look for the attach function and just click on that other object. Now they're all part of the same edit poly. So I'm just going to rename it edit poly. There we go. Turn the attach function off. And now let's go back down to the sub-object element level, and we can see that that is now available as an element, as is that, even though they're part of the same object. So that's how it kind of works at the sub-object element level. We can have different components within one editable poly. Okay. I'm now going to use a little function called bridge. So I'm going to select that little part there. I'm going to select that little part there. I held the control key down while I was making that selection, and I'm going to look for the bridge function, and the bridge function is going to basically join those two together and give me the option to increase the segmentation, like so. And I am going to increase segmentation to about 8 and say OK to that now. OK, that looks good to me. That all becomes, I'm just going to go back to my camera view, but that all becomes one object. Just going to recenter that object. OK, just reposition it in the camera view. I'm not going to move the camera, I'm just going to move the object. I'm just going to do a quick F9. Okay, so now where I use the bridge function, you can see that there's subdivision, 8 subdivisions, and because I've got that particular material on, you can see the subdivisions really, really clearly in the object, which is nice to understand what's going on there. So I think you've got enough tools and techniques there from cutting and separating vertex and re-welding them using the target weld function, cutting a hole in a poly, refilling it using either the border and cap or the polygon subobject and create function. We've got a bridging function between 2 polygons which have been attached together, so we've used the attach function as well. I think you've got enough there to start experimenting, and just basically I want you to be able to cut holes in polygons and editable polys, sorry, and be confident about rebuilding them again. Okay, so I think you've got enough, but just before you go, one last little action, possibly 2 little actions. Okay, we're just going to add a modifier to it, and the modifier is going to be the bend modifier, and I'm going to set the angle to 180. I'm going to set the bend axis to Y to see what happens. Now, because I've got that subdivision in here, those 8 little additional polys that are created with the bridge modifier, I'm getting a nice bend there. Now I want to just double check. I'm going to open up the bend modifier, go to the gizmo, and I want the gizmo basically to be in the center of the object. So as I move the gizmo, can you see the way that the bend modifier is moving with it? So you can center it and move that as well. So that will influence how your modifier works. Okay, so I'm going to accept that. I'm fairly happy with that. And then I'm going to do one last little thing. I'm going to add a second modifier onto it. And my next modifier is going to be called a symmetry modifier. So there it is, symmetry modifier. And when it first kicks in, it doesn't always land exactly where you want it to. Depends on what you want. But you can, just with symmetry mod, you can go into the mirror axis and you can experiment with these. Now sometimes you do it and you see when I click Y it disappeared. Well, if it does that, either flip it, and you can see it now, or go inside the symmetry mod and click on the word mirror, and now you can actually slide its position. So if I say I want it to mirror on the x-axis, like so, or maybe, and you see when I go across the mirror plane it vanishes. Well, if I just hit flip, it'll reappear. And I think that's fine, except that I reckon that the bend modifier gizmo is kind of not where I want it to be. So I just want to go to the gizmo and just roll it round a bit more like that. That's kind of better. And then I'll go back to the symmetry mod, go back to my mirror, and I'm going to flip it and just pull it that way. Okay, that looks kind of good. Okay, so let's have a little look at that. That is all pretty coherent. Now, I feel like I'm making some kind of console or something like that. It feels like that. This can go on and on and on as you can experiment, but I'll just hit Z to recenter that a little bit. I think I'm going to stop there before I go. I might just have one last little play with it before I disappear. Do I prefer it that way or the other way? No, I do prefer it on the flip like that, and then just reconnect. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, now just collapse those. I'm going to go back to my camera view, reposition that object. I'm not going to move the camera, reposition the object, and just give it a quick F9. Okay, so very quickly, out of one box, a little bit of cutting, a little bit of welding, using the cap function, a bit using the bridge function, and then using a couple modifiers, like the bend and the symmetry modifier. The object is starting to become more complicated and interesting, I think. Okay, that's longer than I thought it was going to take, but there we go, 25 minutes. There's a lot of information, so let's see what you do with that simple editable polygon. Take your time, get comfortable with it. Get comfortable with creating new polygons using the connect function, correcting holes where they occur, re-welding vertex, recreating polygons. Just, get comfortable feeling that you can break a polygon apart and then rebuild it again. Okay, thanks for that. See you later.